Dealership manager punches black man, then realizes he just attacked the new owner. The air in the Prestige auto dealership was thick with the hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp tang of new car leather. Marcus Tate, a 32-year-old black man, stood quietly by a sleek silver sedan, his fingers grazing the polished hood. He wasn't here to buy. He was here to claim what was his. Months of negotiations, late-night calls, and a lifetime of grit had led to this moment. Marcus had just finalized the purchase of Prestige Auto, making him the new owner of the struggling dealership. But the weight of that truth hadn't yet reached the man storming toward him. Ron Whitaker, the dealership's manager for over a decade, was a hulking figure with a temper as polished as the cars he sold. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples, as he barked at Marcus from across the lot. "Hey you, get your hands off that car." His voice sliced through the chatter of customers and staff. Marcus turned, calm but alert, his dark eyes meeting Ron's with a quiet intensity. "I'm just looking," Marcus said evenly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in Ron's glare. "Looking?" Ron sneered, closing the distance. "People like you don't look at cars like that. You think you can just waltz in here and touch whatever you want." The venom in his words wasn't subtle, and the crowd salespeople, customers, a mechanic wiping grease from his hands, began to turn, sensing trouble. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He'd faced this before. The assumptions, the hostility, the unspoken rules that tried to box him in because of his skin. But today, he wasn't just Marcus Tate, the kid from a rough Chicago neighborhood who'd clawed his way to success. He was the man who owned this place. "I have every right to be here," Marcus said, his voice low but firm, like a man who knew his ground and wasn't about to yield it. Ron laughed, a harsh, barking sound, and stepped closer, his chest puffed out. "Rights? You don't belong here, boy." The word landed like a slap, and a gasp rippled through the onlookers. A young salesperson, Jenny, barely 22, clutched her clipboard, her eyes wide with discomfort. She'd seen Ron's temper before, but this was different, ugly, raw, and personal. The tension snapped like a taut wire. Ron's fist flew, a blur of rage aimed at Marcus's face. Marcus ducked just in time, the punch grazing his cheek, leaving a sting but no real damage. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some stepping back, others leaning in. Marcus straightened, his breath heavy but controlled, his eyes locked on Ron's. "You don't want to do this," he warned, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made Ron hesitate for a split second. But rage overpowered reason, and Ron lunged again, this time shoving Marcus against the car. "Stop it!" Jenny shouted, her voice cracking as she pushed through the crowd. She was small, barely noticeable in her oversized dealership polo, but her courage cut through the chaos. "Ron, you're making a mistake," she pleaded, her hands trembling. Ron ignored her, his focus on Marcus, who stood his ground, refusing to swing back. "You think you can intimidate me?" Marcus said, his voice rising now, not with anger but with a fire born of years of being underestimated. "I'm not going anywhere." The standoff was electric, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken histories, Ron's entitlement, Marcus's resilience, and the crowd's complicity in their silence. Then, a new figure emerged from the dealership's glass doors. Mr. Hargrove, the outgoing owner, a wiry man in his 60s with a shock of white hair. His face was pale, his steps hurried. "Ron, what the hell are you doing?" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the lot like a siren. Ron froze, his fist still raised, confusion flickering in his eyes. Hargrove reached the scene, his gaze darting between Ron and Marcus. "This is Marcus Tate," he said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He's the new owner of this dealership. You just attacked the man who signs your checks." The words landed like a thunderclap. Ron's arm dropped, his face draining of color. The crowd gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. Jenny's mouth fell open, her clipboard slipping to the ground. Marcus, still standing tall, let out a slow breath, his eyes never leaving Ron's. The twist hit Ron like a freight train. He stammered, his bravado crumbling. "New owner?" he managed, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus stepped forward, not to gloat but to reclaim the moment. "That's right," he said, his tone steady but laced with a quiet power. "I bought this place to build something better. But I won't tolerate hate, not from you, not from anyone." The words weren't just for Ron. They were for the crowd, for the dealership, for the world that had tried to keep him small. Ron's shoulders slumped, the fight gone out of him. He mumbled an apology, but it was hollow, drowned out by the weight of his actions. Hargrove shook his head, his disappointment palpable. "You're done here, Ron," he said quietly. "Pack your things." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Ron shuffled away, his head bowed, the once mighty manager reduced to a shadow of himself. But the story didn't end there. Jenny, still shaken, approached Marcus, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something sooner." Marcus looked at her, his expression softening. "You spoke up when it mattered," he said. "That's enough." It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of forgiveness, a bridge between two people caught in the same broken system. In the days that followed, Marcus took over the dealership with a vision that went beyond profit. He implemented training on inclusivity, hired a diverse team, and turned Prestige Auto into a place where everyone, regardless of who they were, felt seen. The wooden signpost in the lot, once a forgotten piece of decor, now bore a new handwritten message. "We rise by lifting each other." It was Marcus's promise to his staff, his customers, and himself. The incident with Ron became a turning point, not just for the dealership but for the community around it. People talked about Marcus's strength, about Ron's fall, about the courage it took to stand up to hate. Jenny, inspired by Marcus, started a local initiative to address workplace discrimination, her small act of bravery growing into something bigger. And Marcus, though scarred by the encounter, found purpose in proving that leadership wasn't about power, it was about justice, compassion, and the will to change. The story of that day spread, not because of the punch but because of what came after. A black man, underestimated and attacked, rising to redefine what ownership meant. It was a reminder that progress, though hard one, was possible. And it left a question lingering in the air, one that demanded an answer. When faced with injustice, do you stand by or step up? Share your thoughts. What does justice mean to you?